Once upon a time, there was a little engine called Edward. He lived in a shed with 5 other engines. They were all bigger than Edward, and boasted about it. Little did Wilbert Audrey know that as he was telling this story to young Christopher, that he would become known for writing many books about talking trains. Never mind the fact those books would lead to the publication of many, many more. We all know Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. Heck, even the people who aren't in the fandom know the show. It's because of the TV show that the franchise achieved global success. But the Prime series is in book format, one that people still enjoy and are still inspired by to this day. Thomas books don't get talked about all that much, except from the Railway series itself. So I thought, while I was having a tidy up and packing them into boxes, while I get ready for a move in the near future, that I would show some appreciation for the books. I used to have an insanely huge collection of Thomas books, but over the years it has decreased significantly. Some are newer editions that I found in charity shops, but the best majority are those that are left from years of collecting them. Some I hold on to as little nuggets of nostalgia, and others because it would feel like a crime to part with them. So today, I'll show you the books that have stayed with me for so long. This is my Thomas the Tank Engine book collection. So first up is Duck from the My Thomas Story Library collection. I used to have a significant amount of books in this series. They were each named after a specific character and would adapt a story from either the Railway series or the television series. This one covers Duck Takes Charge and Donald's Duck, and it has been met at the mercy of my sister, because when she was much younger, she had a habit of chewing on the books. So if you see teeth marks or bits where the books have actually got this kind of wear and tear, it means my sister has been at them in her much younger years. I also have Boko, which is a bit of an oddity in this series as it's the only one to have illustration work that's also done by Clive Spong. Gladly I can say that this one is in fine condition. There are no teeth marks anywhere. I think it was actually the last one that I purchased for this collection. I actually got it on holiday. Next we have some Railway series books written by Wilbert Audrey himself. So this is number 16, Branch Line Engines, which covers Thomas Comes to Breakfast, Daisy, Bullseyes and Percy's Predicament. This one is number 22, Small Railway Engines, which covers the stories that were recently adapted for television, Tit for Tat, Really Useful Railway, no, just Useful Railway, and Mike's Whistle, also in a story that's exclusive to this book, Ballast. And I have Mountain Engines twice. For some reason I thought it would be ideal to actually buy 2 copies of this book. Either that or I actually got gifted the second one. So this covers the only stories to be told about the mountain railway engines such as Coley, Godred and Lord Harry. I'm glad to say that these are not the only Railway series books that I possess, as these are actually the duplicates. For some reason I believe I've kept on to them just in case anything happens to the other copies. You'll notice that I also collect the 90s variant, rather than the rebranded look that have been going out since 2015. I don't like that the Christopher Audrey books have not received the same treatment. As someone who would want the full collection, I really want it to be consistent. For Thomas annuals, going in chronological order, we have Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends annual. I believe this one is the 1986 annual, but they're not dated for some reason. There is a copyright written on the inside page, so I'm just going off of that. Then there is also Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends annual. This one is the 1988 book. These past couple of annuals I've actually collected from charity shops. I do apologise on behalf of who thinks he's all that because he's got a loud vroom vroom. Then we have Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, the official annual. This is the 1995 book, and is actually the first annual to feature the Skarloey Railway engines, which are strangely written as standard gauge, as a weird idea to get the standard gauge and narrow gauge engines to feature in the same stories. Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends Annual. Now I must correct myself, as it's actually this one that features the Skarloey Railway stories that I mentioned previously. The other one did introduce the Skarloey Railway engines, but with a double page spread, introducing them with all little biographies. Thomas and Friends Annual 2001. So we've got the first annual since the rebranding, and they finally started marking which year the annual belongs to. This one is actually my favourite of the annuals. It's got a very Robin Davies art style to it. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it was his work that's actually being used here, but it does look slightly different. Thomas and Friends, Annual 2003. So this one definitely has Robin Davies artwork featured inside it, as well as a few stories that actually use screenshots from the episodes. It's also the first annual that doesn't have original stories written for it, and actually takes from the TV series to provide stories in the annual. And then weirdly I've got the Annual 2008 in the collection. I'm not entirely sure why I've kept on to this one but scrapped others, but alas, it's there in the collection. Thomas and Friends Bumper Activity Book. I've got 2 copies of it, and I'm assuming that's just because I wanted to do the activities that much, even though I never actually did many of them. That's the thing with being a bit of a perfectionist, I suppose. You're too scared to start something. I am an absolute sucker for books that have Robin Davies illustrations on them. That art style is just chef's kiss. Talking of that Robin Davies art style, here's another one of those. This is the Thomas Story Treasury, which contains Thomas Comes to Breakfast, Thomas and Gordon Off the Rails, and Thomas and the Hurricane. Now these Robin Davies illustrated versions of Thomas and the Hurricane are the only exposure that I had to this story for the longest time, not knowing it was actually a Christopher Audrey story. Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree, illustrated by Robin Davies, and this particular copy is a tie-in with the National Meningitis Trust. So this is a rather interesting book. There's actually multiple of this Thomas and the Christmas Tree with these illustrations, and I had the board book version in which Donald and Douglas are painted black like in the television series. But if I show you this one, let's find an illustration, you can see that Donald and Douglas are actually painted blue like in the Railway series. And yeah, it looks rather weird here. Now I had this book before even knowing that Donald and Douglas did get blue paint in the Railway series, so it was just a very confusing error in my eyes. Thomas and the Station Cat, written by Christopher Audrey and illustrated by Ken Stott, another illustrator whose work I simply admire. Hello Thomas, which is illustrated by Ken Stott and written by Wilbert Audrey. Or at least it credits Wilbert Audrey. This is just a fun little book that I believe you can try and spot all the engines that are hidden by obstacles, buildings, etc. Thomas and the Tiger. Take that, Big World, Big Adventures. Thomas has already met tigers. Thomas and the Pony Show. So this is another one of those Christopher Audrey meets Ken Stott books. And there was actually quite a few of these ones where it's just standalone stories in a little square book. I quite like these, and I wonder why they were never adapted for television. Thomas the Tank Engine Easy to Read Treasury. So this one contains that same pony story, but 2 other stories. And this book is actually where the grey E2 comes from. You'll have seen, if you browse the wiki enough times, that there's actually a grey E2 photographed next to Thomas in one illustration, and it's definitely in this book that illustration makes an appearance. So this one's an old favourite of mine, just simply Thomas the Tank Engine, 25 of the best stories from the Railway series, by Reverend Wilbur Awdry, OBE. It's a compilation book, and in the end it actually includes a nice little biography of Wilbur Awdry and his career. So this book contains stories from Thomas the Tank Engine Thomas again, Henry the Green Engine, Toby the Tram Engine, Gordon the Big Engine, and 8 famous engines. The Railway series, but in a slightly different format. These are the Thomas the Tank Engine Book Club books. So these each contained 2 stories from the Railway series, and were just simply a promotional idea, I do believe. Most of the books in this collection were stories written by Wilbur Awdry, but some of the Christopher stories did make it into the collection. So going in order, we've got Edward and Gordon, The Sad Story of Henry, Thomas and Gordon, Thomas the Tank Engine, James the Red Engine, Thomas and Terence, Thomas and Bertie, Henry and the Elephant, Troublesome Engines, Percy Runs Away, Henry the Green Engine, Toby the Tram Engine, Off the Rails, Gordon the Big Engine, Saved from Scrap, Bertie's Chase, Old Faithful, Percy and Harold, A Close Shave, Trucks, Home at Last, Hello Twins, The Deputation, Thomas Comes to Breakfast, Bullseyes, Allentold Engine, Bowled Out, Duck and Jukes, Buzz Buzz, Percy in Disguise, James and the Diesel Engines, and Thomas the Runaway. Ooh, that's quite a few books. I have thought about removing these from my book collection, but I'm not quite sure yet. The Adventures of Thomas. 8 fantastic stories about Thomas and his friends. This was published to tie in with the 60-year anniversary, and features lots of promotional material from Season 8, and maybe Calling All Engines. However, it all contains Season 3 stories, with Season 3 photography of course. Thomas the Tank Engine Storybook. Again, another book that's made specifically with Season 3 stories in mind. This one was published at the time of Season 3. Buzz Books. Now we're touching some really nostalgic territory. In order we have Thomas's Christmas Party, Thomas and Trevor, Percy and Harold, Thomas Comes to Breakfast, and 4 Little Engines, the only one from my original Buzz Books collection, and the last one in the Thomas series to be published. These 4 are actually up for sale at a charity stall in Sainsbury's. Ladybird Books, even more nostalgic. First one is Edward, Gordon and Henry, and Gordon Off the Rails. Then we somehow have 3 copies of Thomas Goes Fishing and James and the Troublesome Trucks, Percy Runs Away, and Thomas and the Breakdown Train. I think this one that I bought actually came with the audio cassette, as I remember listening to Ringo Starr's narrations for it. Unfortunately, I no longer possess the cassette. Thomas's Christmas Party, and 2 copies of one of the Season 2 Ladybird books, which contained 3 stories: Daisy, Percy's Predicament, and Woolly Bear. I'm sure these books were a big part of the nostalgia of many Thomas fans, especially those of the 90s. Now, with all of those out of the way, we get to the absolute pride of my book collection. Railway series books. This one is So All Reading Between the Lines, which I got on my 16th birthday, signed by Christopher Awdry. Here are 2 copies of Thomas Comes to Breakfast, which is the extended version of the story as written by Wilbur Awdry, which includes Daisy's arrival while Thomas is waiting to be sent to the works, as well as his rebuild and how that felt for him. Thomas's Christmas Party. Definitely not taken from my primary school's library. Definitely not. No. Young me simply forgot to return this book and they never really asked about it. They don't deserve it back anyway, it was a terrible place. And the crown jewels themselves, the Railway series books. Wilbur Awdry's 26 volumes, all in that 1990s sort of style. I have enjoyed reading every single one of these, fact-checking with them and using them as illustration reference. Wilbur Awdry's writing is certainly above the rest. And Christopher Awdry's books are here too, all 16 of them. I bought these individually off Amazon around 2013, I think it was. Every now and then I would just make sure that I'd saved up a bit and then bought a book and just waited for its arrival. I believe I actually bought them in groups of 4 at a time. I'm so glad that I got these when I did, because it's not only consistent with my collection of Awdry books, but apparently Christopher Awdry books are so hard to come by these days, and that's perfectly understandable. I remember trying to find books before turning to Amazon, and you just couldn't find any. In fact, even Wilbur's were hard to come by. You can guarantee that I'll be looking after these books till the end of time. So that's all the Thomas books that I currently own. It's been a nice nostalgia kit to be looking back through all of these books again. If you're a newcomer to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. It'll really help boost this channel and increase the chances of more content being produced in the future. I shall look forward to seeing you next time, but for now I think, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to take some of that me time. Do 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 do. Meh.